Hey guys, welcome to the Wandering Sword. Spencer and Kyle. Hope you guys are doing well. I know it's been a long time, but we're getting out more content. And today we have a special guest for you. We have Joe, who's actually the author and the creator of the Knights of the Cross that we've been working on. How are you doing today, Joe?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on, Spencer and Kyle. Good to be with you guys.
Yep, glad to have you, man. We've been doing a lot of your podcasts lately, so it's been a lot of fun to get to hang out with you and your audience.
Definitely. I've really enjoyed having you guys.
So Joe, if you would you give us a little bit of your background and just give some information for our viewers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I just am a longtime fan of history. Really got into the Middle Ages. I don't know, I guess around college time. I actually did a degree in history. That was my first thing I did in college. Started doing awesome. Yeah. Started doing YouTube videos about Crusades history. I was really into that from early on. Really starting the account wasn't a very intentional thing. I just kind of was like Real Crusades history, just whatever, you know. I didn't really think about the name that much. Since then, the name's kind of haunted me because I feel like it's kind of it could be a little bit more of a thought out thing. But you know, I don't know. I started uploading videos. Like I think the first video I did was 2009, 2010, and it was like way early in YouTube. And you know, I just did a few of them, and over the years, I started noticing that people were watching them, and I started getting more into it and doing more. And it's just kind of turned into a long-term project that kind of is a pretty cool thing. I still enjoy doing it, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That's awesome. Now, is there like a fake Crusades history out there that's like your rival?
Yeah, probably the Kingdom of Heaven movie.
I love that movie though.
I knew we were going to get into it eventually, but yeah, there's a lot of things that the Kingdom of Heaven does that's not historically accurate.
Yeah, I like at the very end when they're like, let's tie this into like the modern war in Iraq right now, and I'm like, that's not really applicable.
Yeah,
you're stretching Kingdom of Heaven.
The armor and stuff is, and I think the fact that they use chainmail and not plate armor, that's like the one good thing. But I mean, a bunch of the helmets are wrong, and like the Muslim stuff is all wrong. And then the costumes they've got, like for example, the Princess Sibylla, the stuff she's wearing is completely absurd. Like it looks like some kind of crazy, you know, Oriental costume thing. It's not really what they would have been wearing. But anyway, not
very
anachronistic.
No, it's right. It's right.
Have you noticed that like you mentioned the helmets and like the armor being wrong? Richard's helmet's like a Salé from the 15th century. Right. They always do that. Like whoever is king is like 200 years more advanced in the armor technology than everyone around them. Like, I don't know what that is. Every movie does that.
Yeah, it's that kingly power allows you to travel into the future and
bring back the technology, whatever we like, and like that looks good. That's period pretty.
What made you want to learn about history and the Crusades, like to begin with? Like not to start your channel, just your general interest.
So it kind of happened by accident. I was actually arguing with my mom when I was like in high school about the Middle Ages, and I was telling her the Middle Ages, that was just a terrible time when everybody was backward and ignorant and stuff. And she threw out this book about Queen Isabel I of Castile and said, like, read about this. This is, you know, I disagree. And I remember reading that book and just really being blown away by the life of Isabel I of Castile and the whole thing of, you know, the crusading in Spain and the Reconquista and the Moors and all that stuff. And it just was really fascinating to me. And it was kind of that book that made me fascinated by the Middle Ages. Before that, I was kind of your typical person who would just say the typical myths about the medieval world, like the kind of thing that's backward, ignorant time. It's kind of weird for me to think about. I was, you know, a musician. That was my thing. I wasn't really interested in history at all. But that just really launched me into this lifelong love of that period. And the Crusades in particular have always attracted me just because of the interaction between Islam and Christendom. You've got this kind of epic meeting of these cultures clashing over this idea of the sacred, which that in itself kind of has an epic quality. I mean, you can see why the Crusades long term have been evocative and people have found them fascinating. And once you get into it, I mean, the personalities are huge. I mean, Richard versus Saladin, that's almost, you know, larger than life. I mean, it's hard to even, when you're reading about it, it almost seems like, is this really history? This almost seems like, you know, something that could be created, you know, in fictional writing or something. I mean, it's better than fiction, but it's not even just that. I mean, beyond Richard and Saladin, you've got, I mean, you know, Baybars in St. Louis. You've got you know, the big personalities from the First Crusade. All the stuff going on in Spain is fascinating too. So,
and it's such historic people like El Cid, and it seems like you said it hits on that almost fictional point, like where the rivals are just epic level proportion. You're like, did this really happen? Were these really real people? And it's also something that's transcended even our time in the modern. People can understand the strife of protecting land, going at land, conquering, or just adventure in itself. And that's really interesting. Cool.
Yeah, and there's so many interesting characters too, that it's very interesting that you picked the one that you did. I was expecting like Richard or Baldwin or something, like Baldwin the King.
Oh, you mean for the Knights of the Cross thing?
No, I mean like Baldwin, King Baldwin,
the leper. Baldwin the leper.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like I expected you to say someone like that. I didn't expect like, you know, someone from the Reconquista. I'm just surprised.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first thing that drew me in. But the thing is, when you study the Reconquista, like when you read about, you know, Isabel I, of course, this was the 15th century. There's a lot of stuff in there kind of tying crusading in Spain to the Holy Land. There was kind of this sense that there was this connection there. I remember when I read, as a high schooler, reading that book about Queen Isabel, it talked about Godfrey of Bouillon and how he was, you know, this legacy of the First Crusade. And that immediately made me want to read about the First Crusade. So yeah, it's kind of this, I don't know, it's this big sweeping epic type quality. And I think it's fascinating too, like how both sides, it was so important to them. And it was, and there's this kind of striking shared heritage there. Like, I mean, these holy sites are the same or similar in the Holy Land, and there's this Abrahamic tradition that kind of underlies it all. It's weirdly echoing, and yet at the same time there was this intensity of feeling of like this can't be resolved except through war. So there's just a lot. I don't know. It's endlessly interesting.
Yeah, and it's all encompassing. You can't really spider webs into one thing, into one thing, and into one thing, and you can't help but want to have more of it. That's really cool. I appreciate that. So next question, your YouTube channel, as we said, the Real Crusades history, which you guys should check it out. We'll put links in there as well. Obviously focuses on the Crusades, as we've been talking about, but also on your channel, I see you talk about some Viking era, some other information. What other things do you talk about on your channel?
Well, I would say probably in the past couple of years, I've gotten away from just doing Crusades, just because my interests have expanded. For a long time, it was like pretty much Spain and the Crusades. Those were my two things. And then also like the Baltic stuff too. I was into, you know, the Northern Crusades.
Yeah.
But lately I have been getting more into early medieval history, Vikings, you know, early Holy Roman Empire, Charlemagne, the earlier Reconquista. So yeah, Vikings, Normans, like William the Conqueror became a huge thing for me. Like the Battle of Hastings started really fascinating me. So yeah, mainly that stuff. The Vikings versus the Anglo-Saxons in England has really started to catch my attention. Earlier last year, I started reading a bunch about Alfred the Great.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I would say it's kind of like Vikings and Crusaders and Normans.
Yeah.
Real Vikings, Crusades, Norman history.
That's outstanding. Very cool.
Yeah, I love Alfred the Great history. What's that show? The Kingdom? Is that what it's called?
Last Kingdom, yeah.
Last Kingdom?
It's pretty good. Yeah, there's a lot of inaccuracies in there.
Yeah. I wrote some papers on Alfred the Great in college, and I was like, I'm ready for the show. I wrote all these papers and read the primary sources, and then I'm like, that's not what I'm watching, but I do like it.
Yeah, I think in the show, don't they have like a Viking guy who's kind of like, oh, he's really the one who helped Alfred win all the wars.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of funny.
character.
It's kind of funny because, I mean, you think about it, the Anglo-Saxons really were, I mean, they pulled it off. They were able to defeat the Vikings. So I don't understand what would be the point of, saying, well, actually it was a Viking helping them do this, because the Anglo-Saxons had kind of by that point apparently lost some of their edge. They were getting a little bit, too prosperous and
complacent.
Complacent, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the Vikings come along and it's like, okay, we're about to get ruined, but Alfred's able to pull it off. So I think that's kind of more interesting than saying, well, actually it was the Vikings who helped them do it. But anyway, that's a
that's a good point. It's interesting.
So your channel has got like 200,000 subscribers or some huge number. How does that make you feel? Like, is it exciting that many people tune in to learn about Crusades and now like Vikings and other things from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that, the channel was able to grow like that. I think the funny thing is still for YouTube, that's still not that big of a number compared to like some of the really big. It's amazing how big some channels are. And history is kind of it's a way smaller niche than a lot of stuff on YouTube. But YouTube's an interesting place. I mean, it's just become the place where people go for just about everything. I mean, music, any kind of, I think it may be the biggest site on the net, something like that. I mean, so it's definitely, for people who are willing to work on it. And I think that's kind of the whole key with YouTube is consistency. And I mean, there was, I think about like there was kind of a couple of series of big jumps in my channel in terms of subscribers. And it's just, I don't know, it's just like relentlessly making videos all the time. And the reason I did it for the longest time was just because I had fun doing it. I just really enjoyed the process. I enjoyed, writing about history and presenting it. And, for years, I mean, now like I do make some income from it, but that took a long time. And it was definitely never the target because I was just doing it because it was fun and I was making no money doing it. But, once it kind of becomes something that helps pay some bills, then there's more incentive to do it. So, yeah.
Sure. That you hit the nail on the head by saying consistency, which is something the Wandering Sword is trying to get working on. We have fun doing things, but we want to make sure we give a standard of content. But then you start getting into this fallacy of trying to perfect something. And of course, they make some jokes about it. Like every YouTuber there, like they put out a video like, well, that was the worst video I've ever made. And it's still fine. But you just got to put it out there and keep trying.
Yeah, we're a smaller channel. So we're having fun, like just figuring it out and learning. So it's awesome to get to like talk to you and hear about your channel where you're just like, put in the grind, guys, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the key. Also, it's just like figuring out what is going to get people's attention. I mean, there was a long time where I kind of would just do only stuff I wanted to do, like obscure stuff about Spain, like that, I still think it's cool, but like not a ton of people were looking at. Stuff like Templars, Vikings, those sort of big flagship things always are bigger attention grabbers, which, that comes into like, okay, well, what matters more to you, doing something you want to do or, getting a high view count. But the other funny thing too about YouTube is how like subscriber base versus views. Like I think mine, like 20% of my views come from subscribers and 80% are from non-subscribers. And that's weirdly, that is typical for YouTube channels. So again, that just tells you something about the platform. I mean, the platform is there's so many eyes on it. People are, it's like, it's the internet almost that, a lot of the attention you get is because you're there and because you're able to, plug into that as opposed to, like, oh, well, people just love me so much. So they're, they want to see what I'm doing.
Yeah. And like, cause your Baldwin King episode, I believe that got towards 1 million. You have a couple million ones. Like when you look at the metrics and where you like, whoa, 1 million, how'd you feel about that?
I mean, it's, obviously you're like, okay, good. This has a lot of views. But the funny thing about it is, I don't know, trying to figure out why one video is successful versus another one. I mean, thumbnails have a lot to do with it. Baldwin IV is a popular topic. I mean, he was a major character in Kingdom of Heaven. Videos, stuff about him tends to get people's attention. That one, the funny thing about that video, like the one that has 1 million views, it's like a compilation of several of my Baldwin videos that I just threw together to make a bigger documentary. And I uploaded that while I was in Israel just to have something go up while I would be gone. And it just blew up crazy. So that was kind of cool. And that's another thing about YouTube too, especially with history, like longer videos tend to do better. So
that's what I was going to ask, is like any tips for aspiring YouTubers such as ourselves or other people like trying to get this level content or length seems appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I would say is ask yourself, you know, what you're really wanting to do. I mean, I think it's easy to get caught up in the whole like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, get rich off YouTube or something like that. But that is really, really hard, and it can start to suck the life out of you.
Yeah.
So, you know, be careful about making that a priority, because it might end up taking the fun out of something that you should really be doing because you enjoy it, and you shouldn't let it get in the way of other important things in your life. So
yeah, that's why when we first started this, like Doug, Kyle, and I, we were like, we were going to do this anyway. Let's do something that we were planning on doing. We're just documenting it. And if anything, we're kind of doing it for ourselves so we can look back and be like, hey, Kyle, remember that one time we did this thing? But it's all stuff we were going to do anyway and have fun doing it.
Yep. Like some of the trips that we have planned, I mean, they're on pause from COVID, but we were going to go anyway. Like Japan, we were just going to do it. And now we're like, well, let's record it. Let's make something cool out of it and you know, share it if anyone cares, but we care, so we're going to see it.
Or the stunt work that we got to go through thanks to Kyle and your networking doing for the Knights of the Cross. I wanted to start working on stunt work and all those things anyway. It just wasn't sequentially in the time that I thought it would happen. And sometimes things just land in your lap and you're like, let's go with it and run with it. Let's keep going.
Yeah, man. Like speaking of Knights of the Cross, so Joe, you have this big Knights of the Cross project, and we were lucky enough to like get involved and help with the stunts and help in like, you know, the million other things our crew ended up doing, like production and like assistant directing and all that. Like, what was your big inspiration to start the Knights of the Cross show?
Well, I mean, again, that was kind of one of those happenstance things with, you know, doing YouTube. And Austin Kelly of Christian Channel just came to me and asked me if I wanted to be involved. And it's something I've always wanted to do. And I've always kind of thought, like, back when, you know, my channel started to be kind of successful, I remember thinking, well, maybe eventually this could lead to doing like a movie or something, you know, like crowdfunding a movie, something like that. So it was kind of something I'd been thinking about doing. When Austin came to me, I remember thinking, okay, I mean, are you serious? Is this something that you could really pull off? I mean, you know, but yeah, I mean, I really think it's come together, and I'm really happy with the direction it's going in. And it does kind of seem like the logical next step for what I've been trying to do with Real Crusades history. And it kind of came at a time when I was sort of soul searching and asking myself, okay, am I going to keep doing this? Am I still wanting to do this, especially at the level I'm doing it? You know, do I want to like pull back a lot more, or like try something else, or like focus more on writing? Or and Austin kind of came along and had this idea, and I was like, well, you know, I do really want to do this, so let's jump into it and see if we can make it happen. And you know, with a project like this, finding the right team is so important. And there was definitely a point before we found you guys, when we thought, we were really wondering if we were going to be able to do it at all, just because we started seeing, you know, the expense of creating medieval wardrobe and that sort of thing. And
sure,
we found you guys, it was huge. It was like, okay, this you know, this group of people can help us do this. And I think the reality is, if we didn't have, you know, you look at the group of people who were out there filming that trailer, you know, the camera people, you guys, production, you know, me, writing, whatever, that group of people was really essential to make all that happen. And so it so easily could have been a disaster when you think about it. So it's like, I don't know, it's just a crowdfunded project is about the team. That's really what it's about. And if that's not in place, you can't do it.
And they have to be all on board for the goal. There's sacrifices, but not like bad sacrifices. You're putting in the time, and it's like a cog, right? Every cog in the machine has to turn and work in order for this project to get turned out and be quality. And you can't say, oh, well, you guys couldn't have done it without us, but we couldn't have done it without you. So it's just we did this all together, which is really cool.
Yeah, and we've been talking about it on your channel. Every week we've been going on the Real Crusades History channel, and we've been just chatting about the filming of the stunts, the the obstacles we overcame to make our first part of that trailer that drops next week, actually, which is pretty cool.
The way I kind of look at it too is, I mean, bringing you guys into the project and like the people who are there now. I mean, I feel the sense of loyalty to that group of people. And my thought, and what I've always kind of stressed with Austin is like, look, once we get to a point where we can do more, we want to include and create benefits for the people who are there now. So yeah, I had a huge sense of just like gratefulness for everybody who was willing to come out there and be a part of it from the beginning. And I definitely feel like this sense of, okay, once we are in a position to, pay people better and all that stuff. I mean, I want this group of people to be the group of people who's going to benefit from that. So. Oh,
that's really cool that you guys think that way. And that's how I felt when we first started the Wandering Sword. We weren't trying to make money, but we also wanted to do things that we like. At first, it was like, let's get taco money so we could buy more swords and do things we love. But then kind of grew into more. I'm like, well, now I want to support my friend, help this. Or it's not about us, it's about making a stronger community. And it's so cool that our thoughts aligned and things are working out. And like you said, no matter what, we're going to try to do our funding. We'll make a product where we have. And I think things will work out, which also kind of goes another way. You talk about history. And of course, when we put you in armor in the Knights of the Cross which I'll put some videos and we'll show you guys.
I was going to ask about that.
That was fun.
Is there a martial art or a culture that you always wanted to learn about? Or it can be farther into the Crusade culture that you've read about, but actually going out and learning some things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was a really awesome experience, just getting to, go through the process of putting on that gear, because, a lot of it was stuff I'd read about. I have read about, okay, first the jerkin goes on, then you start putting on the hauberk and everything's laced up. Of course, there's no buckles. The lacing process is really fascinating. So it's a history lesson in itself, getting to do that. So yeah, I do think that's one thing that you guys have a huge advantage. And I think that more people who are into history should think about looking into, reenactment and, living history more so. So I want to do more of that. I mean, I want to, once kind of a lot of this is, we've gotten through a lot of this Knights of the Cross stuff, I want to maybe get into some reenactment myself and,
there you go.
Get some gear. Man, we'd be glad to help you out.
Yeah, of course I would turn to you guys for that too.
I mean, hey, there's so many other people. It's a big giant world. Like when we talk about on your channel, Sam, that does a lot of different things. It's all a big family. A lot of people understand, even though we may be under other umbrellas. But Kyle and I have talked about wanting to do various types of like camps. And like we were thinking about doing like a little like Crusader camp where people come do the stuff and it's like, all right, put on your stuff there. And you kind of have that whole kind of training montage / training yard, wooden swords. And you're not out there to like beat somebody up or anything wise. You're just going through the drills and kind of transporting them back to that point
like
in time.
Learning, a specific culture or time, and like the people all get to be a part of that. Because like you said, putting on the armor, that's the thing that blew me away when I first started learning sword fighting. It wasn't just like in my head, I'm like, it'll be like wearing a shirt and I'll have a sword and I'm going to be good at it because I read books as a kid. And then I put on the armor and it was like, nope, I have this, skinny 130-pound kid. And I'm like, oh, I need to bulk up. I need to be strong. And like wearing the armor is its own skill separate from everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much
fun. It kind of makes you think about the way they train for this kind of thing. Like, this was something that would have started when you were a young man of the knightly, or not even you would be a boy. I mean, I remember I was reading, if you read, there's this famous biography of El Cid written by one of his followers, they think. Roderiki. And it kind of talks about, the process of training. And, I mean, you'd be a boy. I think especially it's kind of cool, like in the earlier period when it was more rough and tumble, like the 11th century, like you'd be a kid and you'd start like learning just some of the basics as a page. And, if you were from the noble class, your father or some other relative would be teaching you this stuff. You'd be working with, other members of your family who were military guys, learning how to wear the armor. And it's fascinating to think about that process that would have initiated a young man of the knightly class into this, this thing
lifestyle. Just it's because it's not just one day you pick up this, your father or your uncle or everybody or whoever that you're going to start working on these things, and it's little by little. So you don't just jump in, you're learning how to handle a sword, learning how to handle yourself. Of course, we think about the
whole lifetime career, bro.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing.
You think about the whole...
It's so physical.
Yeah. You think about the chores people have. Training. Yeah, just like even basic chores. And that's why I think it's interesting why we think about this more, because the mundane of what people do in today, desk jobs, all these things, not making them do it for a week long, unless they want to and they come to a camp, but just giving them that experience a little bit. And the practicality, which a lot of historians, they have a lot of the book smarts and not putting down anybody, but they're like, well, this is the way it should have worked and this way. But I'm like, but actually put it on and see how it feels to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be a little different than how you imagine.
Yeah.
And that's really important too, because like one topic that this reminds me of, for a long time, apparently a lot of historians were saying, okay, well, chainmail was not good, that good. I mean, arrows would pierce it. I mean, whatever, this stuff was. And then of course you ask yourself, well, why were people using it for centuries?
People, it's heavy. Yeah.
And then some people, there was some experimentation that went on not too long ago where they actually found that in the field, these arrows would kind of glaze off of chainmail. And it was far more effective than they thought. And I think that like actually putting this stuff on and, doing some stuff with it would kind of show you immediately how some of these assumptions about, this stuff couldn't have been very good. It's just a bunch of like metal mesh or something. Yeah. It would show you immediately how not correct that is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, man, so on that note, like why people did stuff, why do you think Richard the Lionheart was a big fan of the axe? Why was he an axe man?
I don't know, because it just like smashes stuff, I guess. Like it's
I was hoping you'd have like a deep insight on like the psychology of Richard to tell us why he's like swords, no, axes.
Well, I'm kind of wondering if was he definitely an axe man specifically? I mean, I think you may be right about that, but I'm trying to remember a place where that's come up. I mean, I know he used it on several occasions, but I mean, he also used swords, and he also liked those too. So
when he was in Sicily, his sword broke. I think it was Sicily, one of the places he stopped. He broke a sword, and that was like, that's my whole hypothesis. And like, that he broke a sword before he got there, and he was like, what is this? I'll only use these when I have to.
I didn't get a chance to do a lot of research because obviously you guys in the Crusades wise are way more knowledgeable than me, and something I'm learning as we go. But I want to find out reasons why. And I think it still might be as simple as Joe is. It's like it has a lot of mass. It hews through things, especially when you're dealing with people that aren't wearing chain or mostly cloth things. Mass and a sharp point will go through so many things. So yeah, I don't know. It's curious.
Yeah, one thing about him that's interesting is, I mean, he had a lot of experience by the time he went on the Third Crusade. Like well before he was King of England, he was sworn in as Duke of Aquitaine by his father, like when he was like what 15. Yeah, and he was out there like in these, the Angevin rebel wars, just like fighting hard for. And he was like, even back then in the fray, like he earned that title Lionheart very early on. So it's kind of interesting to think about the kind of experience this guy had and what he must have actually been like by the time he was going to the Middle East. I mean,
and that's something that a lot of
people knew his stuff.
And that's something the modern people also forget, that some people, by the time you're 15, 16, 17, you were essentially what we have at this day. You're a 30-year-old. You're in your life, you're a man, you're doing these things, you're slaying people, you're fighting, or obviously you're in the ground. So you're seeing all these things already at this age point, which we see as just a child.
Yeah. And his other brothers weren't nearly so accomplished as he was. Like his older brother, who was Henry, the young king, was kind of ineffective his whole life. And then of course he had a brother named Jeffrey, and then John, and none of them had the kind of edge he had. And he was just from the beginning, just could handle this thing. And he's an interesting guy. He really stands out, I think, in this period.
Yeah. No, I really think it's interesting. I think we had a little point where Bug was asking, he's trying to get more into the character of Richard Lionheart. And after we were talking about when he does combat and slays either Saracen or someone, like, would he have been shaking, jittering in this part? And we're like, at this point, it's another day. Not saying he doesn't value life for all those other points, but this is an opponent. I slayed them. I'm on to the next one. I'm punching the clock. I'm doing work.
My answer was,
yeah.
Richard would say it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you just slayed somebody. It's Tuesday.
Yeah. And it's hard because people in the modern day, that feels so callous, that feels brutal. But when your job is warfare, and I can say this, I was not a combat veteran, but being a veteran in the military, U.S. Air Force, and being in Kuwait, even though we were ready for combat, if it could happen, you never know. This is something you put your life on the line. You're there for your country, in this case, England. You're there to take care of all this, in God's will at this point. You're doing this. So I can only imagine what was in his head and thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that once he was fighting in the Crusade, that was probably a type of warfare that was pretty different than what he was used to back in, Aquitaine, where he's going around like, taking out these different rebels and all that stuff. I mean, it was probably the most intense stuff he'd experienced in his life, but he did have this lifetime of, to get ready for that. Yeah. But one interesting thing about him too is the way he took advice and like the way he gathered people around him who knew the situation. Like, the people he listened to were the Templars, Hospitallers, and the local barons, and he didn't really listen to the newcomers who were all just like going, let's go to Jerusalem, let's go to Jerusalem, let's go to Jerusalem. He was always trying to get the best input, and that's one of the reasons he was successful, because like the Battle of Arsuf, which he succeeded in defeating Saladin there. Surely one of the reasons he pulled that off so well is because the Templars and those guys were kind of like talking to him about how the fighting march process worked. This was a classic thing in the Crusades, because the Muslims had all these light mobile archers. The Crusaders in the East developed this system of marching where it was just like this really tight column that was just really well defended and couldn't really be penetrated by arrows. And that's exactly how Richard organized his columns at Arsuf. And surely a big part of that was taking advice from the guys who had a lot of experience with that kind of thing.
Yeah, he would have had to. It wasn't a thing that they did, back in France or England at the time.
Right.
And that's a sign of a good leader, taking advice. Some people get prideful. They're like, well, it has to be my idea, everything. You're like, I mean, if it's going to work and you guys are the veterans, I will take in the advice.
Dude, so. Spencer, do you know who it makes me think of?
Who?
Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise.
Yeah. Yes, there are parts of that for sure. I was actually nerding out a little bit since we've opened up that can. It's interesting to see how some fictional characters definitely, not parody, we'll say mirror non-fictional characters. And that's a good point to say. I think that's really cool.
What really made him good at what he did was more how he organized his army and stuff. I mean, yeah, he was good, like just one-on-one, but it wasn't like this old Victorian idea that he just rode out there and just like terminated everybody. I mean, it was because of the way he planned things. I mean, he was the reason he was so good at what he did is because he was a planner. I mean,
he wasn't. Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it. You go.
I was gonna say it's not like the cover of like a Warhammer book where you have like that one space marine with a chainsaw sword on like a pyramid of dead slain foes. Like, just doesn't work that way no matter who you are.
But that's the part where some people actually get into from a modern setting and actually learning how hard it is. Not hard, well, that's not the right word. There are different nuances to swinging a sword, and it's not like you just start doing it and you're the best from get-go, even though there are people that are naturals, just like anything. But it's a skill, it's a mindset, and it's really interesting to do such things.
And it's very physical. Like, I think when we think about the thing that's really lacking for people in our current world, it's this disconnect from physical reality. I mean, that's one of the reasons, like when I was talking about like when I was sort of reflecting on, okay, am I going to keep doing YouTube? It's like
Mm-hmm.
making YouTube videos is so just like you're sitting there at a computer, and it's kind of like a non-real type activity. And, you know, one advantage I think our medieval ancestors had over us is they were so constantly dealing with just tangible facts. And, you know, we think about like them being like, okay, well, these people were superstitious. They were so religious. I mean, we're so much more logical now. And it's like, and, yeah, it's funny. But also I think weirdly, in a lot of ways, they were way more practical than us, because we are just like, you know, like we were talking about guys who think like, oh, well, I'm like the Terminator, you know, all I have to do is jump in there. And like, it's like, where do people get that? They get that from movies, where like like so much in our world, it comes from this disconnect from reality. Whereas medieval combat, dealing with kind of like the, you know, unromantic just reality of it, like, oh, you know, this strap hurts my arm, and this chainmail is heavy. I mean, just these facts. It's like confronting real things. And I think weirdly, despite the fact that, you know, yeah, these people maybe believed in like these fantastical things, they were more grounded than we are in this world of social media, you know?
Yeah, and that honestly goes to the point too, where people were just more surrounded by death. And I don't mean the whole like Black Plague, everything death. Like, no, you most of the time knew where your food came from. You were either helping someone slaughter your things, you were doing barter, trading. So the death of killing your food source, the death of someone maybe close to you dying, the death of someone going to war, being a serf or whatever you have. Like when the Lord says, come this part, I need you to raise arms, we're going. So that, and it's practicality in ourselves, people don't really understand.
Yeah. I think that's kind of one thing history can really help us with, is pulling us out of the world we currently inhabit, which I think, you know, unfortunately can kind of be a very deceitful world about reality, and kind of forcing you to confront mentalities, ways of understanding the world that are just dramatically different from us. And you kind of ask yourself, you realize you have a worldview. You realize the way I think about things isn't just the way they are, it's the way I think about them because of my assumptions. And in the past, people had totally different assumptions because they were faced with totally different situations. So that's what it means to be human. Being human is kind of being in a perspective.
A great insight, man. I really like it. Like those same people that you know, are real tough on the keyboard, and everyone's like, well, then prove it, and you know, there's always silence. You know, yeah, in the Middle Ages, dude, you just had to work. You had to see it yourself.
And I think well, go ahead, Spencer.
No, you go. That sounds good.
Well, I was just gonna say real quick, I kind of think about like leadership back then versus leadership now. I mean, you know, the people who are running our society are so hidden away from the grunt brute reality. Whereas, you know, a king like Richard the Lionheart, I mean, he liked it. He liked being out there in the dirt and stuff. But, you know, like
he was charismatic and larger than life and visible.
Yeah, he was the most powerful guy in England and most of France. And this is the guy who was on the ground fighting with the grunts. I mean, that's kind of fascinating, you know. And then and Philip II, you know, he didn't like any of that. He was kind of a hypochondriac. He hated it, but he still had to put on the armor, get out there, you know, in the cold, in the mud and stuff, and stand there with the dudes. And he had to go on crusade. He didn't want to go on crusade. You know, the mood was so intense. Everybody was going. He had to go. He went out there and he was in it. And again, this would be like the equivalent of like, you know, what's his name, Macron or somebody out there in armor, standing in the real world. Whereas now these people, you know, the super rich, the elites, our leadership, they're hidden away. They're like often on some yacht somewhere. They never have to deal with reality.
Yeah,
and
they're more Philip than they are Richard.
Yeah, like, and they make Philip look like, you know, a real trooper, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, again, a problem in our society. I mean, you know, as tyrannical and as rulers could be back then, and that definitely could happen. I mean, they could be tyrannical, but at least they kind of had to deal with reality.
Yeah, and that's part of the human condition still. I feel like life of pursuit and happiness, but then also a good leader is someone that's willing to lead by example and not always saying, go do the thing when you know that person's not going to do the thing at all. And that's something I've learned through, and I try not to go always back, like when I was in the military, but it's a good case. Military, business, friendships, SCA, any kind of reenactment, anything. You do the things with the people. It doesn't matter if you technically are higher on the totem pole. When it's time to roll your sleeves up and do work, even though it's not fun, you do it with your people. You get in the trenches, you help them work, because they're also going to be more willing to help you when they're like, well, I know Spencer's doing it too. If he didn't have to go and actually go out and get some other things or get some sandwiches for everybody.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. And I think what you just said is a big part of why we were filming the Knights of the Cross. It was so easy for us, like, to lead the whole thing. Everybody trusted everyone to work. Everyone, had total faith, and we're making the film that when I pointed at people and I yelled pants, people were like, well, if I yelled at Kyle and said, give me your pants, Kyle would give me his pants. And so then I had the ability to do it back to them.
So for our viewers, the pants joke has become a pants, but it's not really a joke. There's many times we had to do a lot of wardrobe switches.
Yes.
Killing people, other things going on, and you had to make it look different. So there's literally a point where one of our crew, we're like, I need your pants. And he's a 19-year-old, very nice boy, awesome. And I'm used to theater culture where you're not trying to flaunt everything, but you're just like, hey, I've got underwear on and stuff. Just give me the stuff I need to go back on show. So there are many times we're like, give me that, I need that. Or when we were trying to dress up Joe, he took Travis's clothes and put it all on Travis. Like Travis was like, oh, I remember my t-shirt. And now Joe's wearing Travis's things. Kyle sent me back to go. He's like, we need another Crusader as well. So we need two. And I look at Travis, I'm like, you need to get out there too. And he's like, I just gave him my clothes. I'm like, well, put this on. So
find some pants.
So that's our pants joke. Now you know.
We weren't really stealing people's pants or anything.
No. They were given a consent.
But if we had to, we would have.
Yeah.
I mean,
we were that dedicated.
Yeah, when you think about it, us, the whole project of filming that trailer kind of, it kind of reminds you of like what it was like crusading. Crusading was like, okay, everybody from the king to the simplest, servant or whatever is kind of like thrown into this tough situation. Like, Richard was out there, like when they were rebuilding fortifications, he would be out there like throwing stones up on the walls and stuff. Like he was actually helping build castles and stuff himself physically. Again, we're talking about that style of leadership that people always find attractive, where you're willing to, get your hands dirty. And it was kind of like that for us. It was like, okay, everybody is just out here together. There's no real, it's not like, oh, well, that's not my job. No, everybody just threw themselves into getting whatever needed to be done.
Yeah. Which that brings me to like one of our other questions before we start just tying it up. What was your favorite thing out of all this filming when we were out there in California? If you could name one thing, and I know there's a million, but what was one of your favorite things?
Yeah, I think honestly it was, you guys with the equipment and the reenactment gear. I mean, seeing all that, I mean, it was a powerful thing for me. I mean, because I've been reading about this stuff my whole life. It was kind of this first time when I was really surrounded by medieval military gear and getting to kind of experience it and deal with it on a practical level. I think that was probably my favorite part of it.
That's outstanding.
That's cool, man.
That's very cool. And then we're just really glad we talked about budget wise, which we'll put down in our links below as well for the Knights of the Cross, the Christian channel, for funding this project that we're working on. And it will help the Wandering Sword project as well indirectly, because we're a big part of it. But we can't make this happen unless we get the funding to make the show become more of a reality. But we'll make sure to show you all that. We'll make it so you guys can donate whatever you want. But they've really done a really good job. The Christian channel they flew us out there. They flew Joe out, everybody. And that was what made us work there. We were actually part of the production. So I know you guys are starting to see some more videos if you haven't already checked before, but the trailer will be dropping sometime next week or a little bit after. And we had a question when we were doing a live show with Joe on his channel. People were like, will it be like a B film? Will it look like the level? I'm like, no. We were using professional style cameras. We had scripts. We had producers. We had awesome director. Angelo was helping us, and the storyboarding to show from what we wanted and all these things made Joe's writings come to life. And we were trying to do the best we could possible. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we've already seen enough of. I mean, I'm talking about our crew, not everybody. But like we looking at the edits on the trailer. I mean, we already know it's not going to look cheesy. So that's exciting. That's exciting.
Yep, I cannot wait to post it because we're like, guys, it's good. Trust me.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna be so comfortable. Like, well, if you don't, just watch it. Decide for yourself. You know?
Yeah.
No, I'm really excited to see that. So other than that, Joe, what's else on your agenda for as far as the Real Crusades channel, yourself personally?
Yeah, do you have any like big giant projects you're working on?
Yeah, well, aside from Knights of the Cross, which is huge, I am finishing up a book which is about the Third Crusade and Richard the Lionheart. I have just kind of gotten back into a period of really working hard on it, just because I got the manuscript back from my main editor, who is a friend of mine, also an author, Helena Schroeder. Great books that she does. We have kind of a circle of writers who try to help each other, but
cool.
Yeah. So working on that. I really want to make that happen in the next few months. I like the direction the book is going, and I think it's going to be a huge help to us to model, our show off it to some extent, characters, stuff like that. So that also, I guess, dad stuff, being a dad.
That's a big one, man.
How many kiddos do you have, Joe?
I've got two. One just came out of being a toddler. The other one is a toddler. So it's,
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot of work.
It's awesome. I love it. I do love it.
Kyle just recently became a father. So
exactly. Yeah.
Congrats, Kyle.
So I had the kid right before, as we're building up to get ready to go out. And I remember Joe giving me dad advice. He's like, it's going to be like this for a while.
It was so cool.
It's tough when they're little bitty. I mean, and they wake up at night. That is tough, which we're past that phase. So.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm sorry.
He's not. That's why every time we try to put these things together, Kyle's like, when's work for you? And I'm like, it's all up to you guys. I don't have any kiddos yet. So it's all up to you guys. Because I know it's hard. But really, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll make sure to promote the Knights of the Cross as well as also any things you get on your books. Please let us know. We gladly support that on the Wandering Sword channel. If anybody has any questions, please make sure to put that in the comments below. We really appreciate any kind of input or feedback. We're working on some merch coming out too as well. We're going to be tying it also to help funding for the Knights of the Cross. We're going to work together all that kind of purchase and everything in there too. But we've got some nice things coming.
Got some big announcements coming for that.
Yeah. So awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we appreciate you. We'll catch you later. And as always, wander on. And cut!
Thank you for staying with us to the end of the video. We at the Wandering Sword appreciate each and every one of you. We have more new developments on the horizon. As always, we want to give a special thanks to our patrons. We are currently in the middle of revamping our patron page. Take a look at patreon.com/thewanderingsword. Every little bit helps. And to our top patrons, Sito Sama and Byron Swanson, Pathfinders of the Wandering Sword. Till we meet again, wander on. The Wandering Sword Project Ending Script, Session 1. Take 1. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the video. We at the Wandering Sword appreciate each and every one of you. We have more new developments on the horizon. As always, we want to give a special thanks to our patrons. We are currently in the middle of revamping our patron page. Take a look at patreon.com/thewanderingsword. Every little bit helps. And let's try that again. Every little bit helps. And to our patrons, Sito-sama, And to our top patrons, Sito-sama and Byron Swanson, Pathfinders of the Wandering Sword. Till we meet again, wander on. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the video. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the video. We at the Wandering Sword appreciate each and every one of you. We have more new developments on the horizon. As always, we want to give a special thanks to our patrons. We are currently in the middle of revamping our patron page. Take a look at patreon.com/thewanderingsword. Every little bit helps. And to our top patrons, Sito-sama and Byron Swanson, Pathfinders of the Wandering Sword. Till we meet again, wander on. Take 3 or 4. I can't remember. Lost count. We at the Wandering Sword appreciate each and every one of you. We have more new developments on the horizon. As always, we want to give a special thanks to our patrons. We are currently in the middle of revamping our patron page. Take a look at patreon.com/thewanderingsword. Every little bit helps. And to our top patrons, Sito-sama and Byron Swanson, Pathfinders. Blech. And to our top patrons, Sito-sama and Byron Swanson, Pathfinders of the Wandering Sword. Till we meet again, wander on.